This is Anime Ricochet. Hello everyone, my name is Jeff, and with me, as always, is Jacoby, aka Kobe, the actual real son of a baseball coach.
That is actually accurate. My dad coaches UNLV baseball team.
That's right. So, if you don't know, this is Anime Ricochet, the podcast where two dudes who know nothing about sports talk about sports anime. But Kobe, you actually do know a little bit about sports, so this might be our last podcast after making that reveal.
Yeah, why would you reveal that? That ruins our credibility as knowing nothing about sports.
Not only do you know a little bit about sports, but we also have a third dude here who will also be talking with us. He comes from the land of anime podcasting, such as ourselves. He is from the fabulous Anime Dumpster Dive, and his name is Anthony. Welcome to the show, Anthony.
Hey, glad to be on. Thank you, guys.
Of course, thanks for being here. Tell us a little bit about Anime Dumpster Dive.
Yeah, Anime Dumpster Dive. Well, if you haven't checked it out yet, this is your one-stop shop for finding out whether or not the hype about a bad anime is true. Come on, because we watch all of the bad anime for you, so if you've ever had an inclination or had a friend that's told you to watch, let's just use School Days. Everybody knows School Days. If there's been a friend that has told you to watch School Days, come and watch our podcast first. We'll tell you whether or not you should keep watching or if you should just listen to our review and kind of take our word for it.
Anthony, what do you know about sports?
I played baseball and I swam and I was on the bowling team at one point in my life as well. Yeah,
bowling team? Why don't we do a bowling anime?
We got a regular athlete
yeah,
here.
I'm not too sure. Exactly. All-American,
All-American bowler Anthony.
But yeah, no. I played baseball for the first 13 years of my life, and I've been a big baseball fan, ever since. My favorite team is the San Francisco Giants. So, but my entire family. So
just kidding.
You guys,
yeah, we don't know. It could be good, could be bad.
So, yeah. I mean, other than that, I watch baseball currently. I wish I was more into football, admittedly, but
no, if you're into
that
football,
is fantastically useful.
We couldn't have you on this one because this week is all about baseball.
Exactly, and I am happy to not strike out.
Whoa! He knows how it's done.
We're done, Jeff. He's taking over everything now. You make one good baseball fun.
I made a joke about Jake replacing you. Maybe Anthony will replace Jake.
Jake replaced me, and now Anthony is replacing Jake. And then we're gonna go over to Anime Dumpster Dive and do a whole Anime Dumpster Dive for like an April Fool's joke. And they're gonna do a whole
just trading players.
Deal. I'm gonna hold you guys to that, but tell you the truth, you guys can pinch hit me anytime.
Oh, here's another one.
All
right, slow down, Anthony.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna.
We're only allowed one pun every 5 minutes.
Yeah, you're using them way too fast.
Okay, I'll start the clock right now.
Good. You're on a 5-minute penalty.
Oof. That's not a real thing in baseball, but got it.
Sure. We were close.
I was close. So the anime in question, if you don't know, is a baseball anime, and the specific anime we're going to be discussing is called One Outs. So, Anthony, Kobe, are you guys ready to discuss One Outs?
Oh, I'm
absolutely
so ready.
So, One Outs is an anime based off of a baseball manga series by Shinobu Kaitani, originally serialized in Business Jump from 1998 to 2006. Shinobu Kaitani, looking through his work, I don't really see anything that I recognize. He's worked on One Outs, obviously, Liar Game, The Psychic Odagiri Kyoko's Lies, and Winner's Circle E Yukoso. And that last one, Winner's Circle E Yukoso, came out in 2016, and I saw one image of it, and it looks like it's about horses.
That's it.
So,
but it seems like a common
thread
throughout those seems like kind of psychological stuff. They're more like inner games.
Yeah, well, as you'll soon discover, a big theme of this show is gambling, and I think a lot of those other shows seem like they might bend towards that way. Liar Game, that sounds like a gambling thing, maybe.
Absolutely.
Horse racing,
sounds
gambling.
like a game where you have to outwit your opponent.
Exactly. And Business Jump is it's like Shonen Jump, but instead the audience is mostly business dudes aged 20 to 30. So that can kind of give you a feel for what kind of show this is. This isn't a shonen series. This isn't for young people, and you will also quickly see how true that is as we discuss it. The anime adaptation was made by Studio Madhouse, and the anime began in October 7th, 2008, and ended on March 31st, 2009. And Studio Madhouse, if you don't know, they're a huge studio. They've worked on a bunch of popular things, including a lot of really solid old movies like Ninja Scroll, Perfect Blue. They worked on Vampire Hunter, Trigun, Black Lagoon, Death Note, and a very recent and popular show, the first season of One Punch Man.
One Punch!
So this ain't no noob studio. They know their shit. With that all out of the way, usually at this point, Anthony, we discuss the characters of the show.
Deal.
And I think really the only character worth discussing is the main character himself, because the whole anime really revolves around him and not really anyone else. The main character, his name is Tokuchi Towa, and he is
God.
Is essentially, yes,
Yeah,
he is
described
God.
as God a few times.
He's not your typical sports anime protagonist. First of all, he doesn't start off as an athlete. He's a gambler that uses baseball to make money off of people, essentially. And the game that he plays is a gambling game called One Outs. And how it works is essentially you bet on either the pitcher or the batter. And the batter's goal is to hit the ball into the outfield, and the pitcher's goal is to strike out the batter. And this guy, Tokuchi Towa, has not lost a single game in 500 games, and over 500 games. Well,
499.
That's not true. Right. There is one game that he loses to one of the other characters in the show, but I guess we won't go into that too much. But essentially, events transpire to where he has to join a professional baseball team. So right off the bat, we're not in high school days right now. I think a lot of sports anime, they have storylines revolving around high school characters, but this one is actually like, actual professional baseball players playing for big bucks, for big boy bucks.
Yeah. Anthony, keep in mind here, you're joining us. We've done this a few times. We've done this, quite a few times, and we watched a lot of sports anime, but all of them are basically the same in terms of their character, the protagonists, and some of the settings with like high school students and their clubs on the team. This one that you're joining us for is completely out in right field compared to all the other ones we watched.
Okay. I mean, I've seen a few. I've seen a little bit of Free, and I definitely know that as far as the high schoolers being our main characters. I mean, come on, that's a typical. I don't want to call it a trope, but that's a typical kind of theme that you see throughout literally most popular animes right now. So I was definitely glad to see a little bit of the contrast. That to me. That was pretty cool.
It's set up such more interesting stakes than anything we'd seen before, because all the other sports animes are even Free, for example. It's like, oh man, we got to win the big competition. I mean, and sure you can get behind that, but there's something so I don't know the word I'm looking for. Something so tense about. Oh man, they're betting a lot of money throughout all of it. This could ruin lives.
Right. 50,000 yen is $5,000. US, pretty close. It's right now I think the exchange rate is 1.1. That's a little off topic, but but when they're talking about these huge deals, and specifically later on in the anime, at one point in time, not to spoil too much, this main character, he gets his contract pretty close to a little under what is that, $200 million? For a contract
to get up
for
there,
a baseball
for
player
that they thought he would get paid nothing on.
Exactly. And for somebody like Derek Jeter, where $75 million was kind of, not even something to scoff at for Derek Jeter, that just kind of puts it into perspective what kind of money they were kind of playing with. But as the risks you're kind of talking about too.
I don't know anything about baseball athletes and their salary. So that's a big chunk of money. Like that's an outstanding amount, just to confirm.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. Derek Jeter at one point in time was getting paid, I want to say by the Yankees, somewhere close to just about $110 million, as far as the salary is concerned.
But that's
you
after he built himself up as one of the best in the game, right?
Exactly. And statistically, baseball players are actually, there's some of the people scoff at how much they make, but they're some of the highest paid athletes in all of sports. You talk about guys in the NFL, they're not paid as much as some of these guys that are playing baseball, which is crazy.
That is crazy.
That's interesting.
Yeah. That's something new. I'm glad we learned that. I'm glad you're here, Anthony.
Yeah. Ooh. Bring on the facts, Anthony.
I got them. I got
the facts. But all that relies on Tokuchi's desire to to beat his contract and win. And that gets back to the question is, how do you guys like Tokuchi as a main protagonist?
So just to reel it back in, I wanted to talk about more about him and what kind of person he is and stuff.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Yeah.
Sorry. So we're kind of talking about like gambling and all that stuff, and so if you don't know, if you haven't caught it by now, like this show revolves around a lot of gambling, and Toua Tokuchi, as I already said, is a gambler. His contract is based on basically gambling. Like if he gets for every out that he gives up, or for every run he gives up, he has to pay his owner like 50 million yen, and then for every batter he strikes out, he earns 5 million. So on the surface, the money is against him right now. Like he's going to be losing a lot more than he gains on the surface just looking at the contract that he agreed to. But what makes Tokuchi so special, and the reason why he hasn't actually lost any games in the one-outs game, is because he has godlike perception, intuition, and he just knows people inside and out, and he knows them so well that he's able to plan out his moves several steps ahead, and is essentially able to allow his opponents to bury themselves in their thoughts and in their decisions. And I think that's what makes him a very interesting character, is that he's definitely not the best athlete, and they say that a lot in the show as well, is he only knows a few, he doesn't really know that many special crazy pitches. But what he does know, he uses to great effect, and he uses more mind games than actual like sports and physical games to beat his opponent. So, yeah, I think he's very interesting.
It implies that he doesn't need. It doesn't matter the sport or whatever he's doing. As long as he can outthink who he's against, then he's going to win, because he'll be 7 steps ahead of them no matter what, and that makes him, excuse me, just an interesting character.
Yeah, I think it added a lot of conflict, and I say that in the best way possible, like conflict that keeps you, definitely interested into seeing what Toa is going to, have to work through in this next situation. Who else is he going to have to try and beat, not only physically, but the mental game. Like that's something that I found was the coolest part about him is, talk about an interesting character. Not only does he, and he says it during the anime too, that he doesn't just beat his opponents. He literally will beat them to death and then step over their exactly.
He'll piss on their graves.
Piss on the graves.
Exactly,
and that is our protagonist.
Yeah,
he's ruthless. He's a ruthless man.
He's ruthless. That is a good way to put him. Yeah,
he's ruthless in that he doesn't want to let anything slide, because if someone's doing something that he feels isn't good, like by his standards, then he'll want to not just prove them wrong, but prove it wrong to everybody else, and just to really drive home the fact that what they're doing is stupid and inconsequential.
Yeah, and again, this sports anime is different from other sports animes in that essentially, you've got one team against another team, and it's a battle of physicality and also a battle of wits, and maybe there's a bit of a push and a pull and a rise in the tension between the two teams. But really, this show is about Toa versus essentially everyone else, sometimes even against his own team. And, because he has like this godlike ability to read everything and plan everything ahead, he will eventually find out how to beat his opponent. And so the interesting part about the show is figuring out what he's trying to figure out. And so what I think is cool is like this show is less like a typical sports anime, which you said several times before. So to compare to another type of anime, I think this show is very much like Detective Conan. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that show, but no. I guess the closest analog is like Sherlock Holmes. It's a detective show because really, you got Sherlock Holmes. He's a genius. He's a savant at figuring things out, and you as the viewer know that he's going to figure it out. And part of the entertainment value is seeing him figure it out and then eventually learning the conclusion that he came to. But it's also good in that typically in Sherlock Holmes stories, there's enough clues in there for you to maybe take a stab at it and solve the problems. And I'm not sure if the show gives you the opportunities to solve it yourself in every single scenario, but I know of at least that they do it at least one time in the show where they kind of give you the hints and the clues for Toua Tokuchi, for what Toua Tokuchi is thinking of. And the only reason I noticed it once is because I didn't start thinking about it like, maybe this is like a detective show where they kind of give you the clues as to what he's going to do and all that stuff. But anyways, yeah, that's the best way that I can describe the show is that it's trying to figure out what he's trying to figure out and seeing all the clever ways that he can get out of the situation.
It totally changes because when you don't really know Tokuchi a lot throughout the story, you're just like, oh man, is he going to come out of this? Like, okay. And then as you start watching the show and realize that Tokuchi is always going to win no matter what, the joy of the show is watching is like, oh man, I can't wait to see how he gets out of this one. Like, because he is.
Yeah, and I liked that about the show. Sometimes it can get a little campy in that sense that you're like, okay, come on, what else can this guy work through? Like, you're serious, but I didn't ever feel that throughout the show. I felt like I was genuinely interested in finding out how he's going to work through these problems, and that not only is due to the quality, I would say, of perhaps the writing, but as Toua as a character, that was a very interesting point. Thankfully.
Yeah, and I was worried that in the beginning, like, oh, this Toua Tokuchi guy, he basically never loses, and he knows the answer to everything. I was worried that maybe the show would become kind of boring or like predictable. Like, how many, like, because I was thinking, like, how many tricks does this guy really have up his sleeve? Like, how many ways can he manipulate the sport of baseball? And it turns out he can do it a shit ton of different ways and a shit ton of different circumstances. So I was not disappointed in the end with how many things he could get away with. The other thing I was really surprised by with this sports anime, or another trope that it kind of veers away from, is that usually there's two protagonists at least, and one of them is kind of like, the hot-blooded type, and the other one's kind of like the cool-headed type. But like I said before, really the only main character that I think matters is Toua Tokuchi. There's a couple others, and maybe we can discuss them if you guys want to, but there's not really that dynamic in this show.
I do want to talk about that a little bit because I would say you can argue the secondary main character of this show is Hiromichi Kojima. He's a professional. He's a professional baseball player already. He's been doing it for years, and he's the most popular player on the Lycaons. Lycaons, is that how you pronounce them?
I was going with like let's just go with that.
He's the most popular player on the Lycaons team, and he's the one who kind of brings Tokuchi onto the team itself. So he thought that they would set up a really interesting dynamic between the traditional old school veteran baseball player with steely determination and then Toya Tokuchi, who just seems like, I don't really care, but I'm just going to do this anyway. And so it sets up an interesting dynamic. And then Kojima just completely fades from the story.
Yeah.
Because it becomes the Tokuchi show.
He's relevant for the first 2 or 3 episodes. And yeah, I thought that's what they were going to go for, was that there was going to be like this dynamic between Tokuchi and Kojima. And there kind of is. Like, Kojima is kind of like the paladin of baseball. Like, baseball is like a sacred sport to him. He takes it very seriously. And he's very honorable, and he's great at the sport and all that. And of course, he's a good batter, whereas Tokuchi's the pitcher and all that. But they didn't really play off of that too much, like at all, really. They kind of did it maybe a couple times, but not enough for its presence to be known in the show.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised about that. To be honest, all things considered, the first 2 episodes of the entire show, they build up Kojima so much, and I'd say just more so perhaps in the first. But thankfully, I could say that he's just used as more of a vehicle to get us to our main character, and while I was a little upset that he was, and it's so funny, my anime list lists him as a main character, but I was kind of bummed out that he took more of a supporting role. It wasn't like he was, not there. He just took more of the back burner. It would have been cool to see, I think, as Jeff, as you just said, that kind of contrast between the two characters. And that's
because that is what I will say is like the biggest problem of the show, even though it's not really that much of a problem because Tokuchi is so much fun to watch on his own, but it's just that all the other characters in the show fall into two categories. They're either enemies that hate Tokuchi and are like mad and want to destroy him, or they're characters to react to all of his crazy stuff with "what? Like, I don't understand what you're doing," and then Tokuchi has to like explain it to him and therefore explain it to us. So it's like Kojima, like the rest of the Lycaons are that. Like there's no one really memorable on the Lycaons except for all of them who just go like, "Oh, what's he doing? He's crazy." It's like, guys, just let Tokuchi talk. Let him do his thing. He's probably right. Or, but then Kojima just falls into that as well, even though he could have been a really interesting foil to Tokuchi to help him grow. But then as you go on, I guess maybe the writers or just the way it's structured is Tokuchi doesn't need to grow. I mean, he's just he doesn't need anybody to teach him any lessons because he's in complete control from the very beginning.
Yeah, I mean, as Anthony said, Kojima was more of a vehicle to get us to Tokuchi Towa. But really, I think every single character in the show is a vehicle for Tokuchi Towa to do something. Like you said, to either react to or to support his theories or explain them. Like every other character to me is kind of like the audience point of view. And there's other characters that are like kind of like the villains that are up against him, but yeah, everyone else is us essentially. Like, huh?
Right?
How's it gonna go?
We don't even get to explore how Kojima is kind of a weird dude because it's not so much as a spoiler if we talk about the first few episodes. In the first episode, he loses to. He loses his first match to Tokuchi, and then he goes off into the forest for 2 weeks and chops wood. Like, this is a grown-ass man who just loses one game and then disappears from civilization to chop 1,000 logs every day because this will give him the determination. Like, that's nuts, and they never address that.
No. Yeah. I do like that aspect, though. It's like and it's kind of difficult for, I'd say us, we're always, when you go to baseball games, you're outsiders looking at these professional athletes that have these, high expectations. They're supposed to always perform, so and in that aspect, when you go through a loss, like something like that, I mean, I can say it's devastating because that's what the show showed me, but personally, I can't connect with anything like that. No way would I get my feelings hurt and go chop wood for 2 weeks. There's no way.
Yeah, I mean, Kojima's been playing for
like 12 years, wasn't it?
Decades. Oh, I think it was.
I thought it was 21.
Yeah, 21.
21 years. Oh, that's insane.
He's been playing forever. He's a star baseball player, and he loses to some random Joe Schmo at some illicit gambling den, essentially. And I think, that probably has some psychological impact on a real life professional player. Maybe. I don't know. So yeah, I mean, there are a few other characters that we can talk about if you guys want. I think I can only think of one other character, but again, I think I personally would just be repeating the same thing we said for Kojima, but in a different way.
I guess the one who we should talk about is the owner, because
the contention, the main point of contention.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, so the owner, he's the bad guy of the show, essentially. He's the one that makes the 1-ounce contract.
But wait,
with Towa.
If he's an owner and he's the bad guy, does that mean he's an owner of an enemy team?
No, he is the owner of the Lycaons team, the team that Kojima and Tokuchi play for.
What?
So this guy is basically your archetypal greedy bastard who is willing to have his team play in unfavorable circumstances. He basically doesn't care if his team wins or loses. All he cares about is money, and he knows that they've got a nice big fancy stadium. And they've got a nice, big, fancy player in the form of Kojima. So they get fan support no matter what. They got audience sales no matter what. So he doesn't really care if they win or lose. And now this new source of income comes walking in the form of Tokuchi Towa with the 1-ounce contract they have that is completely unfavorable to Tokuchi. So basically the owner essentially conspires against Tokuchi so that he owes him money. And in conspiring against Tokuchi, he ends up conspiring against the whole team. And so, in that sense, Towa is the hero of the stories that he's up against this greedy owner. and he's using his wits and his smarts to make sure that he and the Lycaons win, so that he gets more money, and it kind of indirectly helps everyone else. And yeah, the other thing I think we should talk about is like the effect that Tokuchi has on other people. Like there are other characters that kind of turn around, they kind of flip from being on the owner's team or the owner's side, quote unquote, to now being on like the good guy side. So he is a ruthless guy, but he's not a bad guy. Like he has a positive effect on people. In the sense that he's able to like motivate his players, and he's able to convert them from being former cheaters to actual good players again, and that kind of thing. But yeah, anyways, the owner, the bad guy. What do you guys think of the owner?
I thought it was outlandish. I loved every moment that guy was on screen. I loved it. I thought that in sometimes it was a little over the top, and I felt that his reactions were unnecessary, but honestly, I genuinely enjoyed every time that he was on.
I was just like, dude, your confidence is a little unearned at this point. Like for the 27th time that Tokuchi outwits him, and then he's like, oh, this time I so got him, and then he just laughs hard.
Yeah, that's my favorite part.
And then whenever he does, he's like,
part.
What? Like he's gonna suffer a heart attack. Yeah. But I guess he's a good point of opposition from Tokuchi, because that's what makes, and he's what makes this, I think, anime great, because Tokuchi's not battling just an enemy like a better player than him. He's battling the establishment, the whole system itself, and his own brand, of play style. So I think having the owner of the Lycaons be his ultimate enemy, because they doesn't care if he wins or lose, just makes for really compelling drama and a compelling story.
Oh, it's classic. It adds so many dimensions to conflict. We get it directly and also indirectly. I loved it. It was perfect.
A protagonist. A smart protagonist is very interesting, but it sucks when a show tells us our protagonist is smart, but then makes everybody else dumb for the sake of the protagonist being smart, like to show off himself. But this is great because the owner, maybe he's a little dumb, but like he's not super dumb because he owns everything around it. So he puts Tokuchi in these really almost impossible situations in his own smart way, because on his side it totally makes sense, and then Tokushi's just smart enough to really come out of it. So I think he's a worthy villain for Tokuchi and for this anime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Anthony, you are the baseball guy.
Yeah.
I think it would be interesting if you know of any real life analogs to these characters. I think Kojima, there's probably a bunch of famous batters that we could point to. But what about Toua Tokuchi? Is there like a real life pitcher out there that's cunning and ruthless and just incredibly genius like he is?
Can you even describe that's my question. Can you describe pitchers as cunning and ruthless? Like, is that like a normal thing for pitchers?
Yeah. I would say that there are certain pitchers currently in the game that are way more intimidating than others. Specifically, Clayton Kershaw. Clayton Kershaw is the current pitcher for the Los Angeles Dodgers. One of my most hated, players in the league. But
boo.
Yeah, right. That being said, just it's how he holds himself. When he walks onto the mound, and this can be said for Toua as well. When he's out there, he commands the respect of the batter. Because just breaking down almost everything about the pitching style of the anime, they got that really, really, really close. And to say that Clayton Kershaw is somebody that can analyze and really guess, maybe not so much. I'd say that looking back, Roger Clemens was a pretty famous pitcher for the New York Yankees. He is somebody that countless times you can find online in interviews that batters were just afraid to hit from him, because he no matter what they did, they would end up striking out against him. So, some similarities that you can find between the anime and the pitcher, being Toua, and, the pitchers of baseball currently are, when you really when you step into the batter's box, there really is that big mental game of where is this ball going to be? My count is, and thankfully this anime does a pretty good job of kind of explaining a lot of that stuff to you too. Not at the detriment of the story. That's what I really liked about it. But let's say I am a batter and I step into the batter's box. And now I know that I have 2 strikes and one more I'm out. What pitch is he going to throw? As a batter, that's something that would end up going through your head.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, so that's something that I didn't know about baseball at all that I think I definitely learned. And I guess we can now transition into discussing about the sport itself and how it's represented in the anime. And maybe, Anthony, you can take the lead on this.
Sure.
But yeah, that's something I didn't know about baseball. Like as a casual, basic observer, I look at baseball and I see, honestly, I think it's a really boring sport to watch. And when I see this and I learned about all the mind games that can potentially be played with the batter versus the pitcher, I was very impressed. It's like, well, I mean, it makes total sense. It's just it's not only is it a mind game, it's a game of wits and trying to see
and positioning,
positioning the most likely pitch that'll come out and all that stuff. And I've realized now how important it is, how the ability of perception in general, how important that ability is in any sport, but in this sport in particular, it's like it's crucial to actually getting those points. So yeah, it's made me appreciate the sport of baseball a lot more.
I would say totally.
Awesome.
My dad's again, because my dad's the baseball coach for UNLV, and it's like I never thought baseball. This made baseball really, really interesting. Like this sport itself is about all the. It said to me, which I'm kind of curious about, Anthony, is just like that baseball, like all these characters. It's never about mistakes. I'm trying to see how I'm going to explain this. Like every character can do everything perfectly, so it's all about. It's all a psychological wit battle, like about where, like a pitcher can mostly, more accurately than not, control where he's going to pitch. If it's a ball, it's almost an intentional ball. If it's a strike in the lower right hand corner, he meant to throw it there specifically, like all the time. I'm wondering how much that actually translates to actual baseball.
So okay, so a couple of points. Just being like a fan first and foremost, I wanted to touch on this. Because what Jeff brought up was, as kind of like a casual observer, I think that baseball excels where most sports don't. Where you really can. It was once called America's pastime. Right. I think that anybody can go to a baseball game and have a good time, regardless of if they are watching with the intent of cheering their team on, or if they're just there, with friends. I can't tell you how many memories I've got of just being there with my family, at the baseball stadium, and everything like that. To kind of touch on the reality of where pitchers can place the ball when they step onto the mound it is frightening sometimes. They have a lot of control, but there is a lot that goes in to preparing for a day.
Right.
When you go out for a game and you step onto the mound, if you're feeling off, that's something that this show does amazingly. Just like I've said before previously, the amount of presence that Toua has when he's on the mound is enough to make most batters like legit cry and get shaky, as they're standing in front of him. So put yourself into the pitcher's position as well. You have so many dimensions that you have to think about of where you want to put the pitch and how much control you have. One thing that I think this show does extremely well is how accurate some of these aspects are. They, in one point in time during this anime, they have Toua pitch 3 games in a row. So I was going to break this down for you. Typically, when a pitcher gets into a game, ideally, if their coach is wanting to keep them in good form, you'd want your pitcher to pitch anywhere from just about 80 to 110 pitches throughout a game, which would be anywhere for a pitcher from the first inning to the 7th and or 8th inning. So one thing that was really cool about this is that they show Toua in preseason pitch a perfect game, and that's awesome. There's only a few pitchers currently right now that are playing that can say that they've pitched a perfect game, which is no hits, no runs earned. So when Toua pitches these games, I was doing the math, because I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to that.
That's great.
This is perfect.
So Toua, to try and balance out, his pitch count, right? Within the first game alone, I think within the first 3 innings, and if anybody is really into the stats, you can go back and watch this because it is really, really accurate. Within the first 3 innings, Toua pitches anywhere from about 28 pitches. That's extremely low for 3 innings. So, and that is due to the fact of where he puts the ball and, allows for his team to field that and then also get an out. And then also in how many he struck out and or walked and caused, kind of a double play to happen as well. So in that sense, it's extremely accurate. I thought that kudos to them because they absolutely, I guarantee that this anime was made by fans, and that's the coolest part.
That's awesome. That's so technical. That's
Sorry,
awesome.
that was really, really long-winded. I was also going to talk about ERA because they break it down for you too, and in the terminology that they use is fairly accurate too. When they talk about how many or how high a pitcher's ERA is a bad thing. If you have a closer. And a closer is a pitcher who typically comes in the later innings of the game, 7 and 8, to finish up after what a pitcher normally pitches. So your ERA, if you have a closer with an ERA of 5.6, that's ridiculous. You don't want that closer.
What is the ERA? Explain it for me, the guy who doesn't know anything about sports.
Yeah, absolutely. ERA it stands for earned run average. So within, let's say, 10 games, at one point in time, Toua didn't let anyone, I think he had 1 or 2 runs, within a couple of games. So his ERA would have been 2.0, within 10 games. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. So
okay,
essentially the percentage of how many people you let through, essentially.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's based on, typically it's on a refresh of 50 games and stuff like that. And you'll see typically, a pitcher's ERA fluctuate even when you're sitting at a baseball game. You can legit walk up and look at the scoreboard and it'll have the pitcher's ERA up on the screen to where you can kind of see what the pitcher is currently doing. So.
Oh, that's cool.
Huh.
So there, let's go back to that game or that instance in the show where he's pitching 3 games in a row, and so the games in a row were about what? Do you guys remember how far away they were spaced out? Every other day?
It was every day, wasn't? Aren't our series usually when it's these games of 3, they're every day?
Correct. Yeah, Major League Series typically are anywhere from 3 games a week to 4 games a week, and they'll be back to back to back to back. And typically in the major leagues, you'll have teams that will fly in, just using San Francisco again as kind of an example. They'll fly into Arizona, spend 3 games in Arizona, and then fly back to San Francisco for the final of their series, basically.
And so then typically they would, I guess, rotate their pitchers across those 3 games.
Correct. And you have an active bullpen of anywhere from, you say, just about 7 or 8 pitchers, relief pitchers, and closers.
Gotcha. Okay. Wow, that is really interesting.
Huh. That makes this show more impressive. It makes Tokuchi even more impressive than he already actually was.
Even more godlike.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The coolest part about it is later, they're having a couple of homestands, and they really make it a point to kind of show, the opposing team literally steamrolls their bullpen. At one point in time, Toa's he's the last resort.
Yeah.
For these teams. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So how well do you feel the anime represents a regular match of baseball overall? Let's say minus all the gambling components and all the mind games and stuff like that. So you said that the show was made by fans. So you think you're pretty confident that most things in this anime is accurate. Is that fair to say?
Fairly accurate. I'd say that, just as far as terminology are concerned, when certain pitching terms, they use the term of forkball quite a bit, and for Americans, that's not something that we would really recognize. If somebody said, well, specifically here in 2018, if you had said that they were going to pitch a forkball back in the 50s, they would have been like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. So that refers to how the pitcher is actually holding the ball. So then another thing too, as far as like accuracy is concerned, when it comes down to the fastballs and different rotation of the fastball and movement, they do a pretty good job. I would end up being called meticulous if I really broke down like what their problems were. But as far as terminology goes, it's really, really close.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I imagine that like, I wonder if it took you guys out of the story at all. I don't think it did for me, but it was enough for me to comment on. So it's like, man, how many timeouts do they get? And how long are these? Like, as a fan of this, they stopped the game so many times for Tokuchi to go, like, give a long-winded monologue to somebody. It's like, I imagine watching from the stands, it's like, that would never happen.
Yeah. And, like, the downtime between batters and pitchers and, like, the end of an inning, typically you get anywhere from, like, 5 to 7 minutes. Nowhere... And it's probably even less than that. It just depends on how fast the, kind of opposing teams are ready to kind of stand and get into it. So, I mean, all of the dialogue between the innings, where some of this was taking place, there were a few times where, admittedly, I was like, okay, come on, how long is this conversation going to be? Yeah. And then, like, I want to believe that at those times where they're having those dialogues, there was somebody up to bat like the whole time, but that's not the case because they legitimately will pan over to the batter after having a 5-minute long conversation. You're like, oh my god, what the heck?
What was happening, man? I'd be a really pissed off fan watching that. I'd be like, why isn't the game going?
Exactly.
So how many timeouts are allowed in the game? Because I am genuinely curious about that. They like you said, Kobe, they break up the game a lot, just have like these long-winded conversations. So how many timeouts can you have in a game?
Admittedly, it was probably different back when they were writing this anime, and there's a little bit of leniency when it comes down to the specific league that they were playing in as well. They probably allow anywhere from like 3 to 5. It's not something that is typically, it's not something that you can typically be penalized for, whereas in like football, like, you have a specific amount of time,
gotcha,
on the clock for your timeouts. You can actually lose an out for delay of game. That's something that they did bring up during the anime. So that is in the official rules of baseball. So if you take an excessive amount of timeouts or you go to speak to your pitcher as a manager too many times, you could run the excessive of getting penalized for delaying the game.
But it seems like if there's like a natural tendency, like I think one, like the catcher's like, oh, I need to go tape up my finger because it's injured. They're always like, oh, go ahead, do your thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They're very forgiving, it seems.
Right, and I would say that that's probably the most inaccurate point.
Okay. They're also having conversations, like the pitcher and the batter are having conversations with like regular tone voices. They're not even like screaming across the field or anything like that.
Yeah,
I'm guessing that's unrealistic.
Isn't it like it's like 90 feet? Is it 90 feet or what? Am I thinking that wrong? From the mound to or 45 feet? How long's do you remember the distance between the mound and the batter box?
That I don't know off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure it's pretty close to like 45 feet. It might be 90 feet. I think it's 45 feet from the mound to first base, and then I think it's like 50 or 60 feet to home
Still
plate.
A crazy amount, enough to be having a conversation.
Oh yeah, that's another thing too, Jeff. To kind of answer that question, is no way, no way in hell.
Gotcha.
No way, no way. There's at one point in time, Toa's standing he's in the stands while he's speaking to a pitcher.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that.
No. Yeah. I can tell you that in the stands, everybody would be calling that guy a bum. That's for sure.
Okay, I'll be picking on him and stuff.
Exactly. And that's how a normal baseball game is. That's what I love so much about it, And that happens with any sport, though,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So does this... I guess, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I was just going to say, so as we said before, the sports anime doesn't really follow a typical sports anime format. There's not too much of a team dynamic, like we said. That's mostly about Tokuchi Towa and how he gets
Towa and his bitches.
And his bitches. And he makes a plan, and the rest of the team follows it, essentially. And we see how good the plan is or how bad it is. And Also, the matchups. These are all matches that are leading up to a championship, and these matches are essentially every team that they go up against is has like a certain like thing going for
to
them.
specifically combat Tokuchi and to challenge Tokuchi.
Yeah, so like you'll have one team with like really, really good batters, for example. That's kind of like, that actually kind of follows a more typical sports anime format where you have a team that's good at one thing and the main characters have to overcome that. But then you'll have another team that's like, you know, they've got a really, really good coach and they've got good strategies and stuff like that. And so I'm curious to think of what you guys thought about, like, how you would rate this anime in terms of the matchups and how entertaining they were overall.
Anthony, you want to go first?
Yeah, I was gonna, you know, and man, I really hate to speak badly about this anime just because I watched so much. I watched so much trash, like normally, so because of the podcast. But you know, there are some things that I would, you know, that not every anime is going to be great, you know, and that's something I think that, you know, being on Anime Dumpster Dive, I've kind of seen. So it's easier for me to pick up on some pacing issues, honestly, like those. There's might have just been how they're trying to pace out. Maybe they really had a hope of a season 2, but the some of those homestands in the series, I didn't feel like they should have been like 4 or 5 episodes long. You know, at one point in time, I'm pretty sure that series there at the very end was like 4.
I felt like 5. Yeah, I thought it was like 5 episodes.
4 or 5 episodes.
It was long.
That's and it's 3 games. Like how many tricks can actually be pulled on this guy during one whole game? You know, so I like that. At the point of pacing is a pretty big detriment to the story, you know, and honestly, I'm not saying that it didn't cause me to lose interest or anything, or, you know, didn't cause me to have, you know, as much of an investment. It's just, I think that's where it really struggled the most. But you're talking about a 25 episode, you know, series. So honestly, there's always going to be a little bit of downtime. You know, there's going to be slower episodes. I totally understand that. But to that point, I think that it kind of hurts it in that sense.
Yeah, I think I agree with that because we'll talk about this more in spoiler section itself, but it's not so much of a spoiler to say this anime doesn't wrap up in this season, and it doesn't look like there's going to be a season 2 because this is like a 10-year-old anime. Right. So it seems like they were hoping for more, and it just didn't do a whole lot. So by not having an open and shut story, and by hopefully banking on the fact that it would do well, it allowed for them to kind of do a bunch of like one-off adventures, like not have to focus on building up to something like a championship, even though they talk about a championship. It gave more time to focus on basically, I think like 3 games is what we go through. Three opponents for them to overcome in different unique ways. And on one level, I thought that worked great because they weren't hard pressed to wrap everything up quickly in order to move the story to its final end game, and it was allowed to kind of spread out and do its time. But then on the other hand, I do agree with you, that last series felt way too long. Like that last game series, that last 5 episodes, especially when they seemed like they were repeating a lot of the same stuff about what, like they'll do something and they really explained it like hella about what just happened. And then a few minutes later, they would go back and re-explain it again. Like, okay, like we get it here.
Right.
But so yeah, on one hand, I liked the spread out individual one-off aspect of it. For like the game structure itself, with them being, you know, willy-nilly with like, oh, well, we'll reach the end eventually because everyone's going to love this show, right? But then, you know, that does come with some flaws.
Right.
Yeah, I think, now that you mention it, I also agree with you guys that the last game was very long, and I think in spoiler section, we can discuss a little bit more about that. But now that I think about it, what they did in the last game to make it super long kind of applies to the whole show itself. Like, there's a general pattern where they will present Tokuchi with a problem, and they will basically reaffirm that problem several times in several different ways. And then you'll kind of see the effects and the consequences of that problem. Like, why is it a problem? How is it affecting the team? And then, of course, there's going to be several circumstances where Tokuchi is going to try and figure it out. And several circumstances where the enemy goes, we got him. Oh, he's fallen into our trap. And then after that, you kind of see Tokuchi, Toa formulate a response and a solution. He implements said plan, and then the enemy goes, "What? Nani?" and he basically solves the issue. And in each of those phases that I described, like I said, they reaffirm the same thing over and over again. I think that's what kind of overall adds to the drag of the show. But Tokuchi Towa is an interesting character enough, and you kind of want to see how he solves everything. So yeah, it wasn't too big of a problem for me. So what about the opponents? So we already talked about like the big bad guy, which is in the form of the owner of the Lycaons. But what about the other opponents? Did you guys think that they were interesting in their own right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh, sorry,
no,
Kobe.
No, it doesn't matter. I'd take a long time. So go ahead.
Yeah, I really did. I thought that the other teams, they brought a lot of variety. As far as the issues that were going to be brought up during these games. You find with the, I want to say it was like the second series, the guy Brooklyn. No. That was the first series.
Yeah.
They're like, I know that they were playing on like the Yankees. Like that was like legit. Like this was based on another team. I loved that. And I felt like for the most part, the best way to put it is that they do bring a lot of variety as far as conflict is concerned. Thankfully, it keeps it pretty interesting.
Yeah, I thought, because as I mentioned before with the owner, I liked how he was more of a structure villain, where he's like, he controls everything around it. So it's not just Tokuchi fighting another talented batter; he's fighting the establishment itself. So I like the owner as a villain, as opposed to all the other players. I think they each did bring in an interesting aspect, a new different challenge each time to challenge Tokuchi's brilliant mind. Yeah, we can talk about more about them, I guess, in the spoilers. But overall, I liked them.
Yeah, and this isn't your typical show. Well, I guess typically they either do or don't go into the villains and their backstory. I think, now that I think about it, this show is not really character-driven in the sense that you get to know these people on deeper than a surface level. It really is just about a circumstance, a challenge that is presented to Towa, and the entertainment is all about seeing how he gets out of it. So you're not really going to be diving too deep into the characters. I know in other sports anime, what I like about, say, for example, like Haikyuu, they'll kind of go into each little character and see their motivations and their backstory, and they'll even go into the opponent's backstory and see why they're playing baseball. And they actually do that, like, maybe once or twice. I can only think of one time that they do that, but yeah, you don't really get to know these other characters on a deeper level. You just kind of know them as, hey, you're the guy that's really good at batting, or hey, you're the guy that's really fast at running. And
I'm saying, and you know why I don't think we got into that so much? Because this anime has something that I don't think any other sports anime we've ever watched had, and it's a narrator.
Yes.
Like I've never seen that before.
Let's talk about the narrator.
Because the narrator, because we didn't need backstory about and to think about and to see characters flashback or to see them like working with their inner thoughts, because the narrator just described what they were feeling and described their history and their background. Like, oh, Hiromichi Kojima is the best player on the Lycaons. He's been dealing with, and he goes into it. And he does that through like a lot of situations to help guide the audience along in terms of backstory. So
yeah, right off the bat, you hear the narrator.
Yeah, I thought he would disappear, but no, he's present. He's a huge factor in all of this.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what you guys think about that. How do you feel about the narrator in the show?
I mean, one of the biggest arguments that I think that no matter what, anime podcast you're on, I think that one of the weakest points of an anime is when they refuse to show you something and they end up telling you, but I felt like at this point, the narrator could have been gone for me, and I still would have enjoyed the anime. I don't think it really, it didn't bring it down, but it definitely didn't build it up, in some aspects. Just because, like, to kind of go back to what both you and Kobe were saying, Jeff, when we were introduced to these other characters, Yeah, I guess if it hadn't been for the narrator, I wouldn't have known, what their batting average was or their record. But it's like when you're seeing that, from a fan perspective, it's like, oh my God, Sammy Sosa's stepping up to bat like right now. Like, who doesn't know Sammy Sosa? In that aspect, I think that we could have done without the narrator. I don't know if it really added, too much. That's just my opinion, but.
I am really curious about seeing a cut of the show that has no narrator to it. Like how much, because I do think because as we get used to him, like I don't think we realize how much he does help guide the story along when needed. Just because it's just become such a natural part of everything. So I wonder what it would be like without him. Because I grew to appreciate the storytelling technique that a narrator was using. And I think I found myself thinking, it's like, man, I wonder what other animes might have been helped if it had like a narrator, like throughout some slog or something, or to help guide us along in an easier way than really weird exposition.
Yeah, so I was a little off put by the narrator at first because, like, as Anthony said, like, I think it's really important for any show to show, don't tell. And this does not do that. You have a narrator that tells you everything. And so I tried to think of, like, well, why did they do that? Why did they go with the narrator route? And I think I know why. And here's my theory. I've already said that, this show is not about the characters really. I mean, you don't really get to know them that deeply. So in a sense, it's kind of a classical hero's tale, I guess, if you could call it that. It's the good guys versus bad guys, and typically in those kinds of stories, you have a narrator that tells you, like, long ago in a galaxy far, far away, etc., this thing happened, and here's a hero, and here's why he's a bad guy, and here's why he's a good guy. And I started formulating this idea in my head when Kojima went off into the mountains and cut logs, like 1,000 logs for like 3 days. And I was like, this is not an ordinary show, is it? Like this guy here, like he's kind of crazy if you think about it. But if you think about it in the terms of like a classic hero's tale, he's like, oh, he's training and he's making sure he's ready for the next thing. Like that's very much a classic hero thing to do. Like, and off the hero went to the mountains where he cut 1,000 logs. That's the kind of thing you'd read in a fairy tale or something. And then if you look at the other character, like Tokuchi Towa, like he's you don't really know him. Like, who is he? What is he like? Why does he gamble? You don't know. You just know that he's the hero of the story, and he's really, really cunning and witty. And so I think that's what the show really is it's just a classic hero's tale. And that's why they use the narrator to kind of maybe instill in it that feeling, maybe. But that's what I think. That's why I think.
I see where that is, but I think more they used a narrator because Tokuchi is supposed to be a character we know, like we're not supposed to know what he thinks, and because he's our main character, that it forces usually like our main character is one who would be like questioning everything around him and have stuff explained to him, or like the main character would be someone who like really dives into the side characters Tokuchi's demeanor and wonders like, man, what's his deal? What's he doing? And like when they come to a realization like, oh, this is why he did that. But because Tokuchi is the show lives and dies with Tokuchi, I just think they needed a narrator to kind of explain stuff to something because Tokuchi sure as hell wouldn't. Like,
yeah, we don't see inside his head at all. We don't really, and that's kind of I guess what, and in my opinion, elevates him to that sort of heroic figure is that like we don't really know what's going on in his head. He just does things and he has to explain himself and what he does is always right and he always beats the bad guy no matter what. And I like the way that you put that too, Jeff. We don't see inside of his head because there really is that large psychological aspect that this show really does play on. 9 times out of 10 Tokuchi, he beats his opponent before he even pitches a baseball to him.
Yeah, he knows what his opponent's going to have for breakfast next week. So it's like he knows what's up.
Yeah. So I guess that might be when it comes to discussing the sport itself, and we'll discuss more in the spoiler section. But usually at the AD, we wrap this section up by asking each other, does this anime make you want to play the sport? And I know, Anthony, you have a background with the sport and you're a big fan of it. So I'm curious, have you ever played the sport? Have you ever thought about playing it? Does this show make you want to play it more?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, I started playing baseball when I was like, I want to say I was like 7 years old. So I mean, I played quite a lot, and I kind of got burnt out on baseball. I think baseball for me,
sorry,
it's
what did you play as? I'm curious.
Oh, play as. Yeah,
What's your position?
I was a shortstop, second base. Second base was like I had second base on lockdown.
Nice.
That was my position. And it's fun to go and toss around a baseball with my friends and be on the beer league in softball. But this show doesn't. It makes me want to go watch a baseball game. If anything. More so, but
yeah, I agree on that element. I don't think it doesn't make me want to play the sport. It makes me want to watch more baseball in terms of, oh man, it's a left-handed batter against a right-handed pitcher now or something, or like, oh, they're shifted this way. It's like to see how they structured their lineup or their batting lineup in order to combat a really good pitcher or something. So in that element, it made me want to check out more baseball.
Yeah, I'm right on board with you guys there. Like, usually when a sports anime makes me want to play sport, there's kind of a very, I guess, positive and energetic spin about it that's like makes me motivated to like, go toss a volleyball around or play some ping pong or whatever. But yeah, this one, it doesn't really have that kind of tone. It is more of a darker tone. And as I said before, this was, the manga was published for kind of an older audience. So it doesn't really it has that more adult feel to it. So it doesn't motivate me to pitch like Tokuchi Towa or anything like that, but it does make me appreciate the sport more, and it does make me feel like if I watch the sport, maybe I'll understand a little bit more and appreciate it more in that way too. So yeah.
And I think it was not the first time, because even like Anthony, our favorite animes around here, it's like Haikyuu is like our gold standard. We also like Baby Steps and Ping Pong like a hell of a lot. But I would say like Baby Steps before this was the only one that made me like, man, I kind of want to watch some tennis. Baby Steps is a tennis anime. Even Haikyuu, which is like the gold standard for sports anime. If you haven't watched it, watch that anime. Just like it doesn't make me want to go watch high school volleyball. Like, I mean, no matter how good it is, but this makes me actually want to watch baseball, which is cool.
Mm-hmm. I can sympathize, but if you guys, need a buddy to sit on the bench with you while we watch some baseball, I'm good.
Okay, you'll be our guy.
Lace you up.
Deal.
I guess.
So next up,
before the spoiler section, we usually talk about stuff like themes and music,
presentation, animation, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that sort of thing. If you were going that way, I didn't know if you were.
Yeah. So I guess we can start with the animation. I don't know. I personally don't think there's much to write home about in terms of the animation. Maybe Anthony, do you think this animates the pitchers and the batters and the running and all that stuff pretty well, or?
Yeah. It's Studio Madhouse. Thankfully we're not getting some B-rate studio, that's going to be doing the animation. I think that they do a pretty good job. It's definitely, as you just said, not something that I would give out praise for, in a portfolio.
Yeah, it's like, oh, look what we did. It's like, oh, good job.
Yeah.
One thing,
right.
One thing I thought they did really well was the reaction. So we talked about how basically the villains and everyone else in the show reacts to whatever Tokuchi Towa does. That's so amazing. But when they react, like whether it's anger or sadness or confusion, it's always like this really detailed rendering of the character's face and all the wrinkles and kinks in all the face, and it's like in a really exaggerated expression with like a colored backdrop and all that stuff. I laugh every time they do that. There's a real comical side to the show that I don't think we've mentioned, and it's all rooted in the animation and how everyone has this exaggerated reaction to whatever Toguchi's doing, and I think that really elevates the anime, I think, in some way. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I liked all the asides, like as they cut away to like explaining either certain elements, like like arrows or statistics points, like where the ball should go or like where the players are on the field. I thought that was a cool thing to cut away to help people who know nothing about baseball kind of understand what was going on. But I also like things like when the narrator described as like, oh, the manager is the owner's dog, and it like painted him in like in a dog costume, like going up and down. Like I thought that was a cool visual, and I'm glad they branched off and did something like that, because it's true, the anime style didn't is nothing to write home about. I mean, I kind of like this older style. Like I don't know why, there's something about it that just I could watch more definitely like this, but it's nothing that's like, man, this animation is just great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had some good diagrams. I really appreciate that. And I think the soundtrack is something that we should definitely discuss, because I personally love the soundtrack. It's got like some jazzy things to it, but it also has kind of like these grungy beats that happen whenever like Toua's formulating a plan or he's trying to explain something, and it gets me really invested in the show. And the OP and the ending song too. Like, what do you guys think of all that stuff as a package?
I like it. I like it a lot. I think the 5-song soundtrack, I think, regardless of how many little beats that they have in between, these points of contention, I think that the music kind of just, it plays along perfectly. I know that however, I do feel it's kind of predictable, in that sense, that like where they play that weird guitar, it's kind of like that weird guitar riff where it's like,
yeah.
It's like, okay, he found out the solution. Okay, now that's what's going to happen. So I'd say that in that sense it's a little predictable, but as far as, the overall theme, of the music that they play with what's on screen, I thought they did a great job. I liked it a lot. There's those jazz beats, man. I can really get behind those. And
felt like I was watching like a 90s like sitcom opening or something.
Exactly.
Like everyone's like posing in front of the camera, like smiling toward it. It's like, what is like a really extended Full House opening or something?
Exactly. And the opening and the outro are very, very good. I do like it. Very reminiscent of a grungy 90s Anthony. So
this tapped into something. This is deep down. Exactly. It's hit home for you, Anthony.
Exactly. Everybody goes through phases, man.
Yours was a grunge phase. Got it.
Exactly.
Man.
Yeah, so Kobe, what did you think? Anything new to add?
No, I mean like nothing. Yeah, I loved Tokuchi's, like mystical, like figuring it out, like when he was talking. I think it was like the guitar riff or something. To me, it sounded like something out of like The Mummy or something, like da na 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 na. Like, ooh, he's mysterious. Like, what's going on with him? It's like I loved it.
And then lastly, before the spoiler section, we talk about the any themes in the show that maybe we picked up on.
The themes that I walked away from is that every protagonist in any sports anime we've watched, Jeff, is wrong. Like they're incorrect in their way of thinking, and Tokuchi is right, and Tokuchi should be in charge of everything.
Yeah, you mentioned to me like, what if there was a crossover with Tokuchi Towa and any other sports anime, and I would love that. I'd love to see him demolish those stupid kids from Haikyuu.
Guys, we can do it. We just believe in ourselves and we're going to win. It's like, well, you're wrong for doing this. Don't just rely on that. Rely on your own strengths. Don't be stupid.
That belief in yourself will bury you. Yeah. And I'll show the whole world how useless your belief is.
Why, Tokuchi? Why? Great. But really, I guess the only what are the themes of it? What is the theme of this? Don't fuck with Tokuchi? Like, it's like,
don't fuck with Tokuchi. Fuck, I don't know. I mean, because a lot of his plans hinge on his, as I said before, his godlike perception, and I don't know if not everyone has that superpower. So, maybe it is just don't mess with Tokuchi.
To me, I walked away with it like, never assume you're infallible because you have one good ability. Like, nothing is ever 100% because there's always a way to outthink or to outsmart or overcome an obstacle or a problem.
That was perfect. Well said.
That's true. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, there's a line. There's a line that I think would summarize that like almost perfectly. Where I think it's like the third episode. They're dealing with that guy. He's got a lot of attitude on the team, and what does he say? He's like, yeah, there's like It's like there's no chance of victory or something like that.
Oh
It's
yeah,
Yeah.
there's not 100% chance of victory, and he like turns around and Toa's smiling, and you're like, why the heck is this guy smiling? He's like, well, if there's not 100%, that means there's a chance we're gonna win.
So you're
saying
there's a chance.
Exactly. That's the overall theme of this show. So.
Yeah, so you're saying there's a chance. It's funny that you mentioned that, Anthony, because Jeff sent me that meme from Dumb and Dumber. So you're saying there's a chance. Like it's like after you watch this episode, it's like this is Tokuchi.
That's
true.
Classic. Yeah.
All right, so I guess that's all there is to say about all the non-spoiler stuff. So now, if you guys are ready, we can jump into the spoiler section
man,
and talk
things
about
get
whatever the
crazy,
hell
Anthony.
we want.
Deal.
All right, well, we'll enter the spoiler section. If you want to skip the spoiler section, if you want to skip the spoiler section, we'll put the timestamps in the description. So we will enter in 3, 2, 1. And we're in the spoiler section now. So yeah, you guys were talking about the pacing of the show, and I wanted to mention that in the last game, in particular, I noticed that the solution to the problems, like he used the same solution twice. You guys remember that? He was having this issue, like they're having the issue of like the stolen signal, right? And so the first time he solves it, he passes a note around to the team saying, use this pattern instead of the first pattern. And it was like, oh, it's such an ingenious move. And I actually really like that. And he used one of his team members as camouflage. But in the next game, it's the same problem. Their signals are being stolen again. But this time there's a twist. Oh, there's a mic. The manager is bugged, essentially. But in the end, like they present it as if it's a new issue. But then Tokuchi basically uses the same exact solution by passing a note around to people. And it was like, I was really confused by that, because he could have just done that from the start, or just done it again in the second game. Like, right. I don't know. And that's when I started noticing, like, this is dragging on like quite a bit, is that they present the same problem and then they present the same solution twice in a row, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out why they did that, and I really couldn't think of a good reason.
My biggest thing with the ending series is they brought out, I can't even remember what that blonde guy's name is, but the pitcher.
Yeah.
Like they bring him up.
Oh, that's right.
It's like they bring him up like right at the beginning of this series, and then I forgot about it.
Yeah, he's like, this guy is a factor in this team, I guess.
Right. I forgot about him until because they have this whole like team, like they break it down at like when they're standing in the practice, they're on like a practice field, and they're like trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And like at that point I was like, okay, cool. This should be coming up like literally right in the next couple of scenes. No, you'll find out about him in the next 3 episodes.
You're talking about the guy with the weighted ball, right? With the fake, fake.
It was like a fear. They put him up right. It was him, and they introduced him at the beginning along with the other, because this whole team was like one that was built from scratch from like the Dominican Republic or something, or Dominica, and they recruited all, I guess, cheaters, because like that's just what they are. It's like, oh, hey, you want to cheat in a game? Hell yeah! Oh, sign me up.
Not trying to come at the Dominican Republic for being cheaters. Or anything like that. It's just like get some better baseball players.
Yeah, it's like him and like it's like the really good batter and then that pitcher, and then like they're not even factors really. And that's just, let's watch Tokuchi solve how their signs are stolen for like 7 episodes.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Which is a weird. I'm just mad that it's like, wait, it's the Ball Boys. It's like, well, no shit. like that's what you thought of.
Yeah,
it's like, oh wait, this whole place is bugged, but we're standing on the other side of the dugout, and dugouts aren't that big, right, Anthony? I mean, like
they have like different rows, like depending on the field that you're in. Like Fenway is their dugouts are pretty cush. All things considered, they have a lot of money, but no, they're no way that big. It does. In one scene, Toa goes to speak to the manager down in the club area. That's kind of where the team has all of their lockers and everything else like that. That does exist. That's real. So
yeah, but when he says something like, the manager stands in the same spot, but then I had him move halfway through the dugout and start talking instead. Like, would that have affected, like, if there was a bug around the dugout? I mean, would that block it?
No, and that's another genuine flaw too, is we brought that up kind of, before. You're talking about a stadium filled with like 35,000 people. There's no way. There's no way. So
yeah, and that was an instance where I don't think they gave enough clues to solve that one. So I mentioned earlier that they give you sometimes. Well, I guess like I said, I only noticed one time where they give you the clues to actually solve the issue at hand, and that's when they were. They found out that the stolen signals were due to a drummer in the audience who would change the rhythm of his drum depending on what sign the Lycaons were using. And I thought that was cool because before they revealed that fact, you can actually hear the drum in the background change rhythm every time they said that they were going to bunt. And I didn't guess that correctly, but after I found that out, I actually went back in time and
you went back in time.
In fact, I went back in time and
that's what you did with it. You could have done anything. Just like I'm gonna watch these episodes for the first time.
Yeah, I went back in time and I sat next to the old me who was watching it, and I told just to see if it was being shown. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. I don't know if there were other instances that you guys noticed where they kind of gave clues to how he was going to get out of his scenario, but in that specific instance, I was impressed that they actually had that attention to detail.
So to me, I guess there was just more of like the wow factor. I guess early on, I'd say that the final conflict, between the signs and the original conflict with the first team, I'd say that those were on a completely different level. You're talking about a team that they're just naturally good, so it was just Toua physically overcoming that instance. And then the same thing, I guess, with the second team as well, with that guy Johnson or whatever the heck his name was.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That it had just more of like a physical aspect. I don't know if I was really trying to figure out how he was going to beat it, more so just like pulling for Toua, going, all right, come on, just pitch this guy out, come on, just get him.
Man, I just
yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I was definitely more interested in the first two games than I was in the third game, because the whole thing behind the third game is they're all cheaters, and so Tokuchi has to figure out how to get around these cheaters, which was interesting.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, but I still like the first two more, just because I guess they're more legit, and so there was more of a legitimate threat as to how he was going to get around, the fastest base runner in the world. And I thought that his solution was interesting, and it made sense too. It was like, just make sure there's a runner in front of him, and make sure that there's 2 outs, so he can't actually steal, or else the inning goes out or whatever.
Yeah.
So I really like the solutions behind that. But the whole cheating thing was it was I guess it was kind of an odd one to end off with too. And I wonder if it was a signal of they're kind of running out of ideas or something. I mean, this manga went on for several years, so I'm guessing they find out more situations for him to be in. But the fact that the last team was just straight up a legit cheating team kind of was
it feels like just like a random
finale.
Plot point, but not a good finale. Agreed, exactly.
Yeah.
I guess that is the weak game to end on, because I will say that the peak for this anime for me is just when I was just I am completely in love with this, was the first game, or the first series when they got into a situation where they're trying to convince, or game of fouls, or foul play, when it's they keep trying to do infractions to it, and everyone's trying to one up each other in that sort of way. I thought that was just an awesome storyline, and it had I enjoyed every second of it, along with the resolution of that game, which is just ending with, because this is a classic Tokuchi plan. It's first it's seems very easy. It's let them score 16 runs, game is called invalid, and that's it. And it's okay, that seems pretty simple. No, actually let's tie them just cause for that, and then at the end of it, let's actually win. Let's go for the win at the end, and then, but no, actually not do that. Let's have them be the ones who forfeit the game. It's a 3-step plan where that first one would have been suffice. So I think that first game is the perfect. The second game is interesting just because it shows how Tokuchi is just a total ruthless bastard. Like when he's just like, oh, we beat the speed guy, great. It's like, no. We got to show the whole league why this is stupid and how you can beat them. So I thought those first 2 games were great, but the third one was just like, yeah, this is okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd say that, at that point I was already hooked, and to not continually try and praise the accuracy of what they're presenting and like the thematic aspect of baseball and everything else like that. But within the first series alone, like there are so many things that I was like, oh my God, that's a real thing. Oh my God, that's a real thing too. Like they did an awesome job. Like when the pitcher lets go of a ball halfway through his stride, that's called a balk. And like they did that perfectly. And then like all of the different rules that they could exploit to try and either delay the game or cause an extra out. I thought that was so cool. Like just added a whole different aspect. It was awesome.
Yeah, we've never seen a sports anime that delved into the rules and the technicalities of the sport as much as this one was, and I too thought that was very interesting. So those things were all legit, Anthony. Like for example, 2 things that I'm curious about are so that whole game that Kobe was describing was like everyone, like the teams were trying to outfoul each other because they're trying to either get the game past the 5th inning or delay it until the weather like got worse for them to cancel the game. So is that true? Like if, say, a game ends before the 5th inning because of some, say, environmental factor like a hurricane or something, like a heavy storm, that whole game is nullified? That's a legit thing?
Correct. It's called a no contest, and typically that is going to be like taken into account between, owners, and they'll for the most part, what they'll try to do is they will either try to reschedule the game on a day where these teams like meet up and try and play it out, so that because at the end of the season, I want to say that there's like 130 or 140 games in a baseball season. I think somewhere close to that. So during that time, I mean, you roughly want, the more games you play, the better the chance that you have to make it into, the pennant. And in that sense, it's like, yeah, of course we want to reschedule this game. So as far as that is concerned, absolutely, it would have been called a no contest. It absolutely would have.
And then the other thing I was curious was in one of the games, I forgot which one it was the one versus Johnson, the very fast and scary base runner. There was a point where Toua called a timeout, and all the outfielders and infielders kind of gathered up and discussed a strategy. But Toua secretly handed off a ball to one of the basemen, and he got Johnson out by tapping it.
Oh my God!
So is that legit? Like you can pass a ball off in the middle of a timeout?
So this is something I was going to bring up too, just because you can find in certain aspects, like when a base runner tags. This is like they consider this like live play. If that was legal, I'm not really too sure. I'm not, that specific instance, perhaps I'm sure that they would let him get away with it. I mean, why not?
Like secretly pass the ball off to someone else.
It's really, really cool. I totally recommend checking on YouTube. And all you got to do is just search like runners, like baseball runners tricked. Something like that. Along those lines, I guarantee that you're going to find more instances more than not. When a base runner, specifically at second, like touches, they have to look up at the umpire and call a timeout if they want to let go of the bag. Otherwise, they have to be within contact with the bag the entire time. So 9 times out of 10, what will end up happening is is they'll get too cocky and forget to call a timeout. And, the second baseman will just be holding onto the ball as they like stand up and literally just reach over and tag them out.
Oh, nice.
And that's legit. Like that can legitimately happen.
Wow,
that's awesome.
The only thing I was mad about that time to get that guy out is because there was a kids movie I loved growing up called Rookie of the Year. It's about the it's the kid who he's like a 12-year-old kid, and he falls and he breaks his arm. But when he breaks his arm, it bends in a way where he pitches like incredible fastballs. So
he's in the major leagues. He plays for the White Sox.
Yeah, he plays for the White Sox, and he becomes a pitcher for the White Sox. He's like 12 years old, and then at the end, the final battle is like him. All of a sudden, he like re-breaks his arm back into place or something, or and then when he falls, so it's like, oh no, that was like a normal kid against really good batters. So then he has to come up with tricky ways to strike out these guys. And one of them, he does the exact same thing, where it's like he calls in his infield, gives it to his first baseman who tags him. It's like, gotcha. So I was like, bullshit. This is you're ripping off Rookie of the Year right here.
Oh.
What came first, 1 outs or Rookie of the Year?
Rookie of the Year came out, I believe. I looked it up. I think 1993. So I think this came first.
That's before the manga too.
Yeah, what the heck? Jeez.
They stole all their ideas from Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, right.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
I mean, to kind of brag about the accuracy too, in the final, cheating aspect of the final series too. I was going to talk about this is that when he scratches the ball. So it's a really big deal. It was really big back in, I want to say, the 80s. And you could do this. This was legit for men who would wear heavy pomade, back in the 40s and the 50s. It became a really big deal for men when they would wipe their head. If they were wearing, like, I don't know, Dapper Dan or something like that. That's not a real pomade, but, like, you kind of get it. Like hair grease. Hair grease was, something that umpires took a really big deal to, because if they were to wipe their hand, the more grip that they can get on that ball, the faster that they would be able to throw it. It's the same thing with like football, and why Tom Brady got in so much trouble, because he was using deflated balls. You can specifically throw it harder, you can throw it faster, you can throw it farther. So in that instance of him like scratching the ball and stuff like that, that was legit. There were instances where people were caught doing that, and it would happen with pine resin. So pitchers would leave pine resin on top of their hands, and then as soon as they would like get the ball back, they would just wipe like the top of their hand or opposite hand, and then pitch. There's one clip on YouTube specifically that I was going to bring up that really highlights this. All you have to do is just type in baseball players cheating. You'll find it. I guarantee it comes up. So.
Is there a real life instance of a catcher hiding a extra baseball in his knee pad?
That's different. There very well might be a story about that. I specifically don't know. That was something that I kind of had a problem with, though, because when you're kneeling down like that, there's only so much space that you actually have. Yeah. You'll blow your knee out. No way.
Yeah, if you fall on that, game over.
That's true.
Yeah. Something I want to talk about in the spoilers. Well, first, okay, this because I think when I just like opened up the description of this just to see where it was at, this manga, I read a plot point for later on in the manga that I think is really interesting. That I was wondering if I could share with you guys, or are you guys going to read the manga after this?
I am not. Gladly, I will hear it.
Yeah, same here. I want to say I'll read the manga, but let's be honest, I don't have time for that.
I think I'm going to, just because this sounds so interesting. I saw a line, because then I skipped ahead really quick. Is Tokuchi eventually becomes the owner of the Lycaons.
I saw that too, yeah.
What?
That's something I read on the Wikipedia entry,
yeah,
and I was like, shit, I spoiled it for myself.
I did, yeah.
Well,
I think
I'm not
I saw
gonna
that
read
same,
it, whatever.
I think I saw that same thing. I know, that's crazy. And knowing that that's where the story goes, that makes me so sad that we don't have another anime of this, or like, because that would have been, that's just, I think that's fascinating. I want to see how he gets there. Like, what?
Yeah.
So that
I'd watch it.
That implies that, and that goes to my other points. Like, are you guys happy with this ending? Like, I was so disappointed. Like, as this last series game took up like more and more episodes. Like, oh shit, this is definitely going to be open ended. Like, it's.
Yeah, I'm always sad when I watch an anime that I really like, and I find out that there's no continuation of it. Like, I was sad for Baby Steps when we found out, like, God, that so story is never going to have an anime ending. We have to read the manga. And, if we want to support the show, I guess we have to read the manga, but I don't really read too much manga, so for me, it's sad. And, yeah, I'm not very happy with the ending because of that. But, I mean, I guess I should have expected it. It was only 25 episodes after all, so.
Well, we say that. Well, so many stories could have wrapped up in 25 episodes.
Yeah, but I mean, the manga too is. I mean, it went on for like 8 years. Yeah. I would think that they wouldn't be able to adapt all of it. Although, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'd say this manga definitely deserves for the rest of it to be adapted, just because of how unique it is. Like, I don't think there's another sports anime like it. Then again, we haven't seen every single sports anime out there. So I imagine other baseball anime are not like this. They probably follow the more traditional sports anime format.
So would you want a second season of One Outs or another season of Baby Steps?
Ooh, I take
Anthony,
Baby Steps.
You take Baby Steps. Anthony, we love Baby Steps a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. What's Baby Steps about?
Tennis. It's a tennis anime.
Tennis anime.
But it's the most technically sound sports anime we've seen, where it's like it actually breaks down exactly every mechanic and gameplay feature of tennis, about like what you have to do in order to become a great tennis player.
And not only that, but the things you need to do as a player, like the out of field things you need to do, you know, like working out, managing your time, getting enough rest, all that kind of thing. Yeah,
that's
but
awesome.
But it's not like it's like, oh, I gotta work out. It's like, no, like this day I gotta work out this muscle, this day I gotta work out this muscle, this day I gotta run, this day I gotta rest in order to build up my tennis muscles. Like it's
and why it's important to do those things and what exactly it affects and all that kind of thing. But yeah, anyways, really great sports anime. We recommend it. I like Baby Steps more than this show though, so even though it's a good show. What do you think?
This one, yeah, go ahead, Anthony.
I was gonna ask a different question, so you answer that, and I'll ask mine after.
Okay, I was gonna say,
right.
Yeah, it's a different show, but this show is just so refreshing to watch. Like I realized after watching all of our sports animes and realizing, like, man, how many of them are the same after a while? Like how many deal with the same instances? So having something like this was so refreshing and so different that I love the psychological aspect of it. And Tokuchi, he remained godlike throughout, and I'm trying to figure out if I ever wanted him to fail, if that would take away some of his mystery and allure, or if the format of the anime just worked as it was.
See, and that leads up to kind of my question too. Is in a sports anime, do you prefer the typical underdog story where a team starts out as inexperienced and slowly grows over the course of a season and then ends up winning, or do you like that constant growth that's kind of shown in an anime or a TV show or a movie for that matter, where they consistently grow throughout the season and in the finale they still lose?
Well, aren't those kind of one and the same? Well, not one and the same, but they're not exclusive, because you can have the growth in an underdog story too, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I'd say that just specifically going back to the ending, you know, that's something that I think would have been pretty disappointing for me specifically. I kind of liked where it ended. You know, I'm not saying I was super happy with like the conclusion, but you know, as far as the story goes, I'm kind of glad I didn't watch this whole build of a season just to watch them finally, you know, just to watch Toa finally figure out how to win, you know, at the pennant. Like that to me would have been a little cheap, you know, and I kind of like that aspect of like growth, continuous growth. Like perhaps Toa didn't do it in a full season. Maybe it took him 2 seasons, you know, something along those lines.
Yeah, I think with having a character like Artie be godlike, like one of my problems with this is that like it lacks heart. Like it lacks anything to really root for, because then it really just becomes enjoyable to watch Tokuchi like destroy all these other people. Like you know, I think I was shoving a lot of popcorn in my face while watching it, like laughing, like, "Ha, you suck!" Like there's a line, like he says to this batter, it's like the batter. I wrote it down. Hold on, it's like the batter has fallen into a pit of despair, into darkness. Okay, what is the line? Okay, it's like because of Tokuchi's actions, a man has fallen into an abyss. He has fallen into complete darkness, and then Tokuchi says he must be finished off. Like Jesus Christ, he's the bad guy here.
Yeah.
So it's not like, but it's not like a heartwarming win, like a lot of the other sports animes we watch. So that's the balance.
That's a really good point, actually. Yeah, that's and a good sports anime, you will be on the edge of your seats, waiting for either the win or the loss, and whether they win or they lose, you feel it the same way that the team feels it. And in this show, it's like, yeah, when they win, it's like, oh, cool.
Well, duh, you have God on your side.
Yeah, and thinking about it too, I think the anime doesn't even really care too much about the victory because whenever the game ends and it's a win, there's not too much fanfare. I mean, they do play that jazz music, and you know
that's why I do it. That's why I kept watching, was for the jazz music.
Yeah, so
that's the only reason.
They play that jazz music. You know they're gonna win, and then you see some still shots of the team cheering, and that's it. On to the next one. On to the next problem. So yeah, the show, and obviously, the reason you don't feel that way is because they don't go into the characters or their problems. And like you said, you know, Tokuchi is a godlike character. He's not human, essentially.
Right.
So
it's difficult to relate to that character.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, this is kind of, I don't know. Maybe power fantasy isn't the right word, but it's kind of that way where it's like, here's a player who is the best at crushing his opponents through wits. And I guess it's power fantasy in the sense that, like, when I watch this, I'm like, yeah, I wish I was like that. Like, I wish I could crush my opponents using my mind and stuff. Like, on a list of superpowers, if, like, Tokuchi Towa's superpowers of godlike perception and intuition and always being able to outwit your opponents, if that was on the list of superpowers, normally I would probably overlook that. But after watching this, that kind of, like, goes up to maybe, like, my top 5 superpowers, maybe. I haven't seen the whole list of superpowers.
the list that's out there.
Yeah. Is there anything else you guys want to discuss in the spoiler section?
What the hell happened to Big Mama? Why the hell did they introduce her? What the?
Any of those characters at the beginning.
Completely forgot about Big Mama.
I made a note about that because it was hilarious. Because I have the other guy's name here. I think it's like Kinosaki or something. Like the two characters we lost to begin with. Like he comes, like they look like they're going to be our focal point. Like they're going to be everything in that. And then like they're totally scammed by Big Mama. And then like the hilarious thing is like the next time it cuts to them, like he's just at Big Mama's bar, like drinking with her, like asking like, why did this happen? It's like, well, she just fucking scammed you idiot. Like
that's true.
What do you expect to happen? And apparently Big Mama knows everything. Big Mama seems just as smart as Tokuchi because she knows everything that's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is basically all the characters they introduced in the first 2 or 3 episodes. Very few of them we see their face again. Yeah, you're right. I thought those 2 batters we were seeing were going to be like our point of view characters. You know, maybe they're the comic relief, or maybe they're the duo. And then Kojima would, of course, be like the main dude. But of course, the 2 batters, I don't think we see them again.
They're there. They're in the background. I think the glasses dude gets a hit sometime in the season, but it's weird that they're just gone from the story.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was trying to think of like, because I know the other kind of main-ish character is Itaguchi, and he's the catcher. And he gets more scenes probably than any other team member, probably even more than Kojima. And he gets some dialogue, especially in the last game. He kind of becomes a more active character in the show. And I thought he was like one of the original batters. But yeah, now that I think about it, he's not. He's like, he wasn't even in those episodes, I don't think.
He barely counts like as a character. Itaguchi is just there to react to Tokuchi. Yeah.
His crazy plans.
I really thought that because I really had no idea the show was actually going to pivot to a Major League Baseball anime. Like I really didn't. I just knew because I didn't look at it before. And so 1 out. So I thought, man, watching that first episode, it's like, is this whole anime going to be about this one type of game, like 1 ounce between the batter and the pitcher? It's like, I don't know how they're going to stretch this into 25 episodes.
I was more afraid. I was more afraid. You guys were like, hey, you want to be on a baseball podcast? And I'm like, all right. For
wait, there's no fucking baseball.
And I watched these. And I watched these first 2, and I'm like, I'm fucked.
I know nothing about this. This is a completely
new
sport.
There is a baseball in it. But it's
everything you know about baseball, throw out the window.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I guess there's a couple questions. What is a balk? I don't know if I ever they'd explain in the show, but I don't know if I really quite understood it.
Yeah. So a balk, BALK, or a balk. If you're from the Midwest, you would pronounce everything. Who knows? But anyways, a balk is when you are in your full motion of pitching. So it's when the pitcher steps off of the mound with the intention of pitching, and he either A, drops the ball or breaks his stride and like does something to like.
Oh, it's kind of like fake his opponent out kind of thing.
Exactly.
Okay. Does that count as a ball or a strike?
It counts as a. So essentially, what happens is the batter would move to the second base, basically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's like an easy way to get them on there.
Correct, yeah. So there were certain instances where we were playing this team, and I was up to bat, and the guy balked on me, and we actually won the game off of that run that we brought in. So, yeah, it was, pretty memorable. It's like I stood there and did nothing.
And you won the game for it. Good job. Good job, Anthony.
Exactly.
Has that ever been used as a actual deliberate strategy, or that seems like more of an accident thing, or is it?
Yeah, 9 times out of 10, it's an accident.
Okay.
I don't specifically think that you'll see, many players use that, just because now, you figure on an actual team, like I said, you're pitching, your normal pitching rotation and your bullpen has anywhere close to from 6 to 7 and can have upwards of just about 13 to 14 different pitchers that you call upon to have, put into that game. So specifically in instances where, Toua is the only pitcher, yeah, it seems like that's the only option, for him to stay in the game longer, specifically in that position. But in a normal game, if you balk once, there's a good chance you're getting sat for the rest of the game.
Wow.
Gotcha. And then the other question I had was, I don't know if this actually happened in the show, or if I missed something, but like, was there an instance where like the other team just won because they won a certain amount of points? Did that ever happen, or was it just the way it was edited, or they might have skipped ahead or something like
they
that?
won a certain amount. You mean, yeah, they lost their first game. They lost a few games when Tokuchi wasn't pitching. Like they lost the first game against the cheaters, didn't they?
Yes.
But it's not like that the other team won X amount of points and they won, right? It was just like the game was over and then they had the most points.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
I think there was one game where it was just like one where Towa's team scored 1 and then the other team scored 2. So it wasn't anything like super bad.
Right. Okay, so yeah. Then I must have miswatched that part or whatever.
You're caught up in Toya's aura.
Yeah,
exactly.
I was too intimidated.
Yeah, is there anything else you guys want to talk about, or should we wrap up the spoiler section?
Big Mama was the only thing I wanted to bring up.
The one I will say is like I did like I think Kira, the character of Kira, the shortstop who was like a plant for the owner who had to get sit out, and then at the end he was just like, but we have no more pitchers, and then Tokuchi's like, we have one pitcher, and then he comes in and gets like his moment. It's like, I thought that was nice.
Yeah, I liked that. That's a moment with heart right there.
That whole arc was like the most heartfelt moment.
Yeah. Oh, I guess that might be something to discuss. Maybe a little bit more. Is that like, at least in the first half of the show, Toua felt more of like a protagonist because he had like, especially in that first game and in that game where he kind of converted Kira into being like an actual player. And then that game where he like made the other team forfeit the game, he had like that kind of like a speech about like, oh yeah, members of our society who are in higher positions, they don't take responsibility for their actions. All they get is like a paltry apology and yada yada yada. And then he basically kind of preaches to the other team, and then like they kind of like fall for it. So it's kind of like it kind of makes it feel like maybe Towa is like ruthless, but like in the inside he's like really a good guy, and he just is kind of cynical. And
he's like the Punisher when it comes to heroes. Like he'll save the day, but he's gonna kill everybody in his path. So I mean,
yeah,
for justice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then that kind of tapers off, I guess, in the last half, which I guess I was not a fan of. I kind of liked seeing the points behind all of his ruthless actions and stuff.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the problem, I guess, putting him up against like a bunch of cheaters, because they're obviously in the wrong. Like they're easy to root against as like the absolute bad guys. I mean, like those other guys, like the speed runner and even the good team, it's like they thought they were doing the right thing. Like they thought that it was a good way to go, and it took Tokuchi to be like, no, this is what you need to do instead. Like, what you're doing is wrong. So there was at least, like, for the third game, there was no justification for their actions at all. But the second two games actually had an element of, just like, oh, this is why we're doing what we're doing, and it makes sense in our eyes. And there's a justification for it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, well, I guess that's about it for the spoiler section. Let's exit in 3, 2, 1. All right, we're back from the spoiler section. Anthony, how did you feel about that?
About the spoilers?
Yeah, I liked it. About the spoilers? Pretty spoilery.
Yeah, pretty nice in there, huh?
On a scale of 1 to 10 for spoilers to not spoilers, that was pretty spoilery.
It was pretty spoilery, so if you stuck with us, you better go back and watch the anime.
Yeah. So now we are entering the final run, I guess. Third base, home run, the home run. Yeah,
the
final
round in third base. There you go.
All right, cool. So yeah, this is where we talk about how you feel about the show and maybe give a rating if you're the rating type.
And an MVP.
And an MVP of the show, yeah. So I guess we could start with the MVP. And
there's only one character in this anime. I mean,
should we? Is it even worth it? Maybe there is an MVP. It is just Toua, right?
Itaguchi. It's
Itaguchi, the catcher with a heart of gold. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know anything about his life.
All right.
The MVP is the one player who's just like, it's like, I had to do what Tokuchi said, or else he threatened to tell my wife about my affair. It's like, what? That's the MVP
guy
right there.
Or the manager, Fat Lips.
Yeah, Fat Lips.
I didn't get to talk much about Fat Lips, but I think he deserves a spot. So yeah, but seriously, I guess that's really it. There's not really an MVP because there's not a cast.
Because there's not a cast, but that's an MVP in its own right. Because I don't think any other character that we've seen in a sports anime or any anime in a while could carry a show like Tokuchi can. Like this show lives and dies on Tokuchi, and because he's just so brilliant, and the show around him is just good enough to challenge him. He definitely is a good MVP.
Yeah, I have to agree. So yeah, we'll finish the show off with Anthony's review or conclusion with the show. So yeah, Kobe, why don't we start with you then?
Oh, okay, yeah. 1 ounce is a refreshing sports anime compared to a lot of the other ones. If you like sports, if you like a sports anime that digs into the technical elements of it, but want a different perspective from it, then this is the anime for you, because it's more psychological than anything itself. If you're looking for heart, this show doesn't really have it, but it does have an interesting protagonist, main character who we follow throughout this whole 25 episodes, who keeps things engaging and interesting throughout. 1 ounce is different enough to be, in my opinion, really good, to stand out.
Yeah, I will say it's a really good anime. It's do not go into the show though thinking that you're gonna have any good feels or even that you're gonna be rooting for the team. You're rooting for anyone really. This show is very unlike any other sports anime that you've seen. It's definitely not like any other sports anime we've seen. So it's worth it to watch it for that respect, for that aspect in itself. But it's also good enough on its own merits in terms of the situations that you see thrown at Tokuchi Toua and how he gets out of it. Just don't expect any character development. Don't expect the show to wrap up in the 25 episodes. Yeah, I think you'll be good. I definitely recommend this show.
Yeah, I recommend it too.
And Anthony, what do you think?
So this show for me is a find.
Yes.
I'm just kidding.
That's great. That's perfect.
I couldn't resist. I'm sorry.
But that's good. It's a find. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Thinking about all of the different shows that I have watched, I haven't really watched that many sports animes, so it's really hard for me to give an opinion as far as a sports anime is concerned. But on the base layer of a show that is interesting, whose main character is strong enough to propel the show throughout the entire 25 episodes, as we've kind of said before, this is a character who does it. And I'd say that the concept of the show itself and content that the writers and animators provide for us is absolutely a show that I would recommend to just about anybody. Even if you're not a baseball fan, I think that this is a show that you could easily sit down and stay interested, in, and dare I say it, have a little bit of investment, for our main character. That being said, you'll find pretty weak spots in, as we mentioned before, the character development and as far as pacing is concerned, the show does not win any awards at all. However, I mean, talk about a solo home run. This is a show that I would absolutely recommend. Golden Glove winner, Grand Slam, out of here. Watch this show.
Well, if it's not on your watch list, should you stop what you're doing and watch it now?
Ooh, coming out with my own thing. Yeah, absolutely. If you're not watching it right now, stop what you're doing. Go watch it.
Good.
Well, there we go. There we have
Well
it.
said.
Anthony, thank you for being on this show. Please,
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
shill for yourself and your podcast, if you will.
Absolutely. Come find us over at the Anime Dumpster Dive podcast. We are willing to dig through the trash for you so you don't have to. You can find us online at Anime Dumpster Dive on YouTube. We release podcasts every 2 weeks. You can also find our links to our Twitter and Instagrams if you have any requests for us to watch. So.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you so much for being on the show again, Anthony. Go check them out. Kobe and I were guests on their shows, so you can dig through that and listen to what we had to say about the trashy anime that they watched. And Kobe, would you like to sign us off?
Yeah, I'd like to sign us off. Again, I'll say what Jeff said. Thank you very much for being here, Anthony. It was really nice to have a baseball fan on here. That was actually really helpful.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. It was an absolute pleasure.
It was a lot of fun having you on. You found this on Nerd Blaze. Like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And we'll be back next time with another exciting sports anime that we'll know nothing about.
Thanks for watching, guys. See ya.